Good morning, everyone. It is amazing to be here in person with all of you today. And I'm Colette Stahlbaumer. I lead Future of Work and Microsoft 365 at Microsoft. And I'm here with three fabulous women and other panelists who are going to introduce themselves. And we're here to talk today about how to build an inclusive tech culture. And before we really get into that topic, please, Maria, take it away.
Thank you. So hi, everyone. My name is Maria Yap. I'm the Vice President of Digital Imaging at Adobe. I have the honor of working on products like Photoshop and Lightroom. And I've been at the company for more than 24 years. Erica?
Thank you. Hi, my name is Erica Lockheimer. I'm the VP of Engineering for LinkedIn. I've been at LinkedIn for almost 12 years, in the industry for 20 plus years, and my focus is leading the engineering team for our LinkedIn Learning business and also our LinkedIn Recruiter business.
I'm Linda Aiello. I am the Chief People and Culture Officer for Stitch Fix. So my team is really at the center of creating great client experiences through how our people and our culture operate. We also make sure that we create an inclusive environment for our employees so they can do their best jobs and do the best work of their lives in a really easy way and frictionless way.
Great. So yeah, we find ourselves here at such an interesting time, right? This moment in time and this inflection point. And at Microsoft, we, like many of you, I'm sure, we all went remote a couple of years ago in a very big way. And we've been talking about this shift to hybrid work for the past couple of years, or for the past year, but we really haven't lived it yet. And so, now we find ourselves at this moment in time where we're going to sort of go into that lived experience more fully. And so that sets some of the context, I think, for our conversation today. So I'm going to kick us off by just really with a broad question about what inclusion means to each of us. And at Microsoft, we take a very broad view. It's everything from certainly diverse representation to how we think about including diverse perspectives and ensuring that everyone feels a sense of belonging and can do their best work, as Linda said. We actually measure this we measure inclusion as part of our employee listening systems. And during the pandemic, 90% of employees at Microsoft said they felt included in their work, which is pretty stunning. It was the highest number we'd seen on that measure in recent years. And again, we think it's probably because, in remote work, it sort of leveled the playing field, right? Everyone sort of had an equal voice, being all sort of from our cameras at home. So I want to hand it over to Linda to talk about what that means to her.
Yeah, and I think it's funny. We'll get more into it later, I think, around that experience. But I had been the one outside of the room for so long, so it very personally hit me when we moved to sort of this hybrid working environment. But for us at Stitch Fix, we think through inclusion and making sure everyone's voice is raised, heard, et cetera. And it's really important for us as we're creating product for a really diverse population. We're serving a really diverse customer. But we also think about this in terms of equity. So it's not just about having a frame of equality, but thinking about how do we raise up voices that are traditionally marginalized and making sure that those voices are heard, that they're seen, and they're supported in new and different ways.
Yeah, I think I'm going to tell a little bit of a story.
Great.
Maybe take us in a different direction. So, how many people here as a parent, like you have kids? So, when I first became a parent, I was a bit overwhelmed and wanted to take a class. So I took a parenting class, and it was about 8 weeks long. And at the very end of the class, the teacher's like, all right, I just gave you a lot of information about parenting, but I just want you to remember two things. One, your child is unique, and see them for who they are. See them for their uniqueness, even as a toddler. And they want to feel included. They want to be part of the family. So give them a responsibility. So if you're grocery shopping, ask them to go find the carrots, right? Make them part of the routine. And I sat there listening, and I just kind of raised my hand, and I'm like, don't we all want that? Don't we all want to be seen for who we are and our uniquenesses? don't we all want to be part of a community and a culture? And so I took that away and I felt like, I think I need to bring that to work. I think I need that in the workplace. And so when I think about inclusion and some of the things you're saying about culture, it's like that's the essence of it. We want to build places where we all are seen for our uniquenesses, and then we're all welcomed into a community and a culture where we can bring our uniquenesses and contribute to that community. So that's kind of how I've been viewing community and culture.
That's great. I think, at LinkedIn, it is about bringing your authentic self, and also it's about a sense of belonging. We know that people are coming from all sorts of different backgrounds, and the pandemic really just made it shifted everybody. It shook everyone. It shifted how we worked, where we want to work, how we want to work, and it's a matter of, do we understand? It's basically how what worked for one individual doesn't necessarily work for another. And that was one thing, like we tried to create all these rules, like, hey, we're going into this hybrid world, this is what it's gonna look like, these are our new rules, and then we're finding out that doesn't work for everyone. So I think what we need to do is just be a little bit more vocal about what works for you may not work for me, and being flexible about that. And so those are some of the policies that we have at LinkedIn. It's not about you need to come in 2 days out of the week, 5 days out of the week. We trust our employees to make the decision that works for them. So that's one big thing on flexibility. But I want to shift the conversation a bit, is when we talk about inclusivity of people, also what does it mean for inclusivity of tech? And being on LinkedIn, our mission is create economic opportunity for every member of the global workforce. And when you think about that's everyone. And with the pandemic shift, we saw something massively happen. We're talking about the great reshuffle. One in 15 seconds on LinkedIn on our platform is getting a new job. We know that before, for the remote jobs that used to be on our platform, it was 1 in 67 jobs. It's now 1 in 6. That's a massive, massive shift. And people are asking for more flexibility. And so all of a sudden we have this platform, we gotta make sure the platform is equitable. And we had to shift everything. We didn't have all the right sorting algorithms on the platform to say, hey, I want remote work, I want this, I want that. We had to make all those changes really, really fast and react to the macro environment of what people wanted. And that is how you change your platform when you need to. And another thing that we did is think about when you're on the recruiter side. So that's you as an individual, I want these things. But as a recruiter, they use our platform to then, I want to search for candidates, search for all of these people that are shifting and in this great reshuffle. And think about like an engineer as an example. You want to search for an engineer, guess what? You can get so many results. And maybe that would be the first page that you get. But if you look at the population of engineers, maybe it's about 60% men, 40% women. That first page that we render to you should be diverse, right? It shouldn't, so it's a thoughtful AI approach of making sure those results are equitable. We will change the way that people hire candidates. So that's some of the things that we're trying to make sure that our platform is equitable, and it's something that we have to continue working on. I don't know if any of you have similar challenges. I'd love to hear about it.
I think for us, we're in the business of personalization. So making sure that everyone has this unique and personalized experience through our platform, that they're each being styled in their own personal way. So, ensuring that the people who are building the tech, and our tech it's a combination of sort of art and science. And art is our human stylists who are working with this, and it's combined with algorithms that actually help serve up what is needed. And if we don't have people on both of those spots that are representative of the population that we serve or that we want to continue to serve, and that we're serving everyone, then we're actually not building the right technology. So really ensuring that, even at that spot of hiring, of building our teams, we're really thoughtful about this. We're, very proud with our representation. It's, we still have work to do. We are not perfect. But we're an organization where 40% of our engineers are female, which is pretty unusual in technology if you haven't figured that out yet. Our board, our leadership team are more than half female. We are female founded, we are female led. And this makes a big difference. And that's only the gender aspect of it. Then thinking about all of the other intersectionality and making sure that's represented in the people who are building the product for our clients and the people who are serving our clients. And it's interesting because as we started to expand, expand what we considered our total addressable market for talent during the pandemic, and we started to look beyond the Bay Area or certain hubs, et cetera, it opens up the possibilities for us. So for those who haven't had flexibility around location, that location flexibility gives you an entirely different opportunity of communities to start to draw talent from. And it's absolutely incredible the difference that can make. And I strongly encourage you, if you're not considering that yet, we can't unsee what we've seen in the past 2 years. We've all continued to work and build our organizations during this time of working remote. So if that was ever a concern, it's actually this works and it's possible, and it actually makes our business better.
Yeah, I'll chime in on that dynamic as well. I mean, in the Microsoft's policy is up to 50% of the time flexible work and hybrid work, and we definitely changed our approach to hiring during the pandemic. We sort of definitely saw that talent is everywhere in a flexible work world. And so we started hiring more diverse talent at more senior levels than we had previously. And it really has helped change the makeup. And I think now it's going to be kind of incumbent upon every leader and manager to figure out how, as we go into this hybrid phase, how do we keep including those people, right, who are going to be remote and aren't going to relocate. And so while we still see numbers going up on, desire for flexibility, desire for remote jobs, as you said, Erica, I think that's going to be a key challenge.
Yeah, I think the idea with, we're all in this place where we've been virtual for a long time, and some people are starting to come back together, and then we're trying to balance hybrid as well. And so, it's probably similar. We have working groups that are trying to study this and provide good practices. So here, and I'd love to hear more about some of the tips that folks are using here, but a couple things that we've been doing at Adobe is, we'll actually start meetings 5 or 10 minutes late on a regular basis. I think you have that policy.
We do that at Microsoft as well, yes.
It's because we started to realize that people needed a moment. For some reason, when we were all together, we would book our meetings back to back and just expected that you could run from one conference room to the next. But on virtual, even though you can literally click into a meeting within seconds, that we felt like we needed to give people that 5 or 10 minutes between meetings to just catch their breath, get a glass of water, just do things, get out of the chair. And so it's really made a big difference for how we, when we started to transition, just that little 5 or 10 minutes really made a big deal. Another thing that we've been experimenting with is, while someone's presenting, maybe either use the chat or use another asynchronous method, because you're trying to have the conversation be focused. You don't want to be breaking out, but you also don't want those voices not to be heard or those questions not to be asked. So we actually encourage a lot of times while someone's presenting to allow them to tell their story, explain the problem or the situation. And then at the same time, people might start chiming in because there's other members of the team that's in the meeting as well, and they can actually answer your question. It could be oh, I can clarify that for you, or maybe that's something that we can talk about in a different meeting, rather than sort of breaking the stream of the presentation or the discussion. So I do think there's some really interesting things that can happen. I will say, though, that one of my first in-person meetings, we all kind of panicked because we didn't have all our notes on screen. I don't know about you, but I have a lot of notes on my screen. I've got a lot of things going. It's like a cockpit, even to the point where when I do presentations, I'll even have a teleprompter. I've got my notes all written out, nice and big. So, I look like I'm looking at you, but I'm actually just reading my text. And so we were all wait, if we're in person, where are my notes? Where's that screen that would give me so much comfort? And so, and you see a lot of us here, we still have paper because we needed something to ground us. But I do think it's going to be interesting. And another tip I did hear about working hybrid is to treat the screen and the people on the screen as if they're in conversation with you. So if this is my team on screen, not only talk to the room, but make sure you acknowledge the screen as well. So just little things like that to just make everyone still feel included, but it will be bumpy. And I think we just kind of ask everyone to just, lean in and be patient with each person and, or ask them afterwards, like, how did that work for you now that like half of the team was in person, but you still weren't in person? So I would also encourage folks to check in. But yeah, any other tips you guys have for like, as you're kind of bridging this back?
I would say definitely on the hybrid part, it is definitely bumpy. I've been going to the office now 1 to 2 times a week. And when you start getting that conference room where everybody's there again, the conference room is starting to take over again, and you have all these people on screen. And it's also raise hand feature. How do you do that? And so now we're raising our hands physically in meetings. Like, how do you keep that same norm that worked really well, that was inclusive? And another thing, when you talk about screens, like when I'm at home, I have 3 screens. I'm like, this is a matrix. I love it. I could do so much work. You get into the office, you have 1 screen, and you're trying to be inclusive. Who's looking at the chat at the same time? So still pop up that laptop and monitor what's going on in the chat so you can make sure that those folks are inclusive. So you don't want to lose the things that were so great that made it inclusive, and not forget, to keep those norms there. And it takes effort. It takes practice, but I think we're going to get there. But I think the most important thing, like you said, is feedback. How did that meeting go? We actually just happened last week. We were so excited to be back in the office. We were just chatting so much, and the people are like, I can't hear anything, or don't open up that bag of chips, or don't do, it's just, right. It's so disruptive, but the energy is so high because you're in the office at the same time, and so you just got to kind of have some self-awareness and check yourself a bit.
Yeah, you're speaking to what my life was before the pandemic, where I was based internationally for my prior company, and I was the only person on my peer team that was based abroad. So I was sitting in Amsterdam or in London or in Tokyo, and my full team was sitting in San Francisco having that meeting, and the meeting would start. And as soon as the subject started to get going, everyone started facing into the table, yes, rustling their chip bag or eating their Cinnamon Toast Crunch, which was a very popular snack at the time. And I'd be sitting there on the screen waving, to the point where I actually had to, every time, define someone who was my ally and my supporter in the room, who would help say, actually, I think Linda has something to say there. So it was the biggest breath of fresh air for me when I was then one of 9 people on the screen. And as we're coming back into this hybrid work environment, making a decision, we had a VP and leadership team meeting last week, and our decision was, okay, even if you're in the office, you're each on your individual screen. We did have a bunch of people in a room together. We had to make sure we, got the mute button thing right, so we didn't hear that. But then you can still have that experience, and you're able to see some of the visual cues from other people. I've spent a lot of time working with people where either I'm not working in my first language, so I'm working in another language, or many of the people on the team are working in their second, their third language. And sometimes it's going to take a moment longer to process and to be able to answer. And you're able to visually see that easier if you're seeing, I only have 1 screen, I haven't moved to the 3 screens. I refuse to go that far. I guess that's the difference between the engineer and the HR lady. But you're able to visually see those cues and inviting people into the conversation in a way that we hadn't. So while that's exhausting, and they talked about Zoom fatigue, it's because you're actually not just focusing on one person, you're focusing on all of those people in there. But I think also layering in some of those other tools, some of the async tools that we can be using after calls. How are we making sure, what's happening on Slack, what's happening on chat during a Zoom call, et cetera, and that we're feeding into those to try to actually draw out some of those other voices as well.
Yeah, I have a little bit of a follow-up, because Microsoft builds a popular platform that we
called
use.
Teams.
Called
yes,
Teams.
Yes.
It's not a plug for
Sorry, I'm on
users.
Team Slack.
But I'm a
Teams
little,
is great.
I'm a little bit of a product nerd, so I'm sure as you were building it, you probably, we call it eating your own dog food, right? Like
Absolutely.
So could you tell us a little bit about what was that journey? Like some of the decisions that were made, like even like putting emojis in, like it seems like a simple thing, but I will tell you, like when some of us were like, okay, we're switching to Teams and we can only see 9 people. Really? Only 9? And then I think when it went to 25, we were like,
Yay,
that's
large
right.
view, gathering.
Right? And then even that funny like virtual classroom mode.
Yeah, classroom
Together
fun.
mode.
Together
mode.
Yes.
Whenever I do this new employee orientation, and I literally, when we come together virtually, I say, okay, everyone, we're going to switch into together mode, and we're going to take a class photo.
That's
So,
awesome.
but I'd love
That's
to
a great
hear.
ritual.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'd
it
love
is.
to hear like what were some of the things that you guys were thinking about or trying to bring in to the Teams platform. you know,
Absolutely.
in this, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'll zoom way out and take a step back a little bit. So we published something called the Work Trend Index. And very early on in the pandemic, we knew, obviously, as Microsoft, we have hundreds of Microsoft researchers all over the globe. We have trillions of signals in our productivity products like Microsoft 365 and Teams. And we very early on decided that we would really pivot the company on this need, this urgent need around how work was changing, sort of minute by minute as we were all thrust into this new world. And so we published our first annual one in 2020. We're actually about to publish the 2022 annual report on March 16th next week, and I'm eager to share the data with the world. But we looked at all the signals, right, and saw like what's happening, how is work changing, how are people using Teams, and then also use that data to inform our product innovation. And so, for example, you talk about, the break. We did brain research that really showed that this 5-minute break between meetings makes a huge difference. Mm-hmm. It actually enables your brain, it changes the chemistry in your brain. Mm-hmm. It gives you time to sort of, the anxiety goes down. You get some of those things that you need to actually reset for the next discussion. And so then we created a feature in Outlook. So you could schedule meetings to start 5 after. And our whole division at Microsoft is on that 5 after schedule. And it really has, these small things in hybrid work are what we find make a big difference. Mm-hmm. You talked about joining the meeting and what you said, Linda, about feeling, like, hey, I'm over here, someone please. Our hybrid work tips, one of them is that resist the urge to, even as we come in and we're so excited to be in person, to start the chit chat before you join Teams, right? Get everyone in the room to join Teams so that you can include those folks who are remote. And so, again, this will take like a whole new level of intentionality. The conversation around how to create inclusive, effective hybrid meetings is the number one question we get from customers right now. I mean, every customer wants to talk about that. And so, it is a new phase. So maybe we kind of shift a little bit more into some of those tips for hybrid meetings. Anyone have kind of thoughts on that?
So one of the ways I try to, build a more inclusive workspace is really trying to remember that we're all people too. And so as much as we want to get into the topic, it's really great to, be human and have, allow for that chit-chat time, but allow for everybody to participate in the chit-chat time. And so I often join meetings where it's dead quiet, and it's really creepy. I think it's like, it's weird. It's like we all work together. We
Everyone's
have
on
nothing
mute.
that we can talk about. And so, yes, I'm that one that will be like, hey, so what'd you do this weekend? Or I use table topics to start a meeting. And so I'll say something like, what's your favorite childhood toy? And you're like, I thought we were going to be talking about the latest charts on our sales. And I'm like, wait, no, what's your favorite childhood toy? And you cannot for a moment not smile or be happy thinking of your favorite childhood toy, right? You can't. And there's a lot of studies out there about when you have that moment of like awe or surprise or wonder, it puts you in a much more creative mindset. So now when we go into that conversation about why the sales are behind or why the numbers aren't falling, you're already sort of like a little bit more open-minded to the conversation, a little bit more curious about the conversation instead of, oh, I'm about to give these people really bad news, right? It's more like I'm coming in with data and we're going to problem solve it because that's what we do. We work together to problem solve it. So I'd really encourage folks to think about that as, as opportunities to get the conversation going, particularly even when it might be a stressful topic. I've been in some very stressful meetings, and they'll literally look at me, and they'll be like, I can't believe you're doing this, but I'll make them do it anyway. And then by the end, we're all laughing, like, really, you would jump out of a plane instead of swim with sharks? I mean, it's the funniest thing. And then I will even admit, I've done this with my CEO and executive team. So yes, I've done it everywhere, and it absolutely works, because I know even with the CEO, by the end of the meeting, even though he did answer the question about what his favorite childhood toy is, and he did ask me specifically, what age, Maria? Because he likes the precision. That he, at the end, he's like, oh, is there another question? Like, do you have another question for me? And I'm just like, no, we're done. We're done with the question part.
But if I can just chime in on that, what you're doing is creating a ritual around human connection.
Yeah. Yes.
Which is what we're all missing and craving. Our work trend index data shows that 73% of people, as we talked to 30,000 people in 31 countries, 73% of them said they want more flexibility. 67% said they want more in-person time.
Yep.
So there's this paradox, right, that we're all trying to navigate. And those rituals, that's another one of our tips, by doing that, you're creating a moment for human connection. And that's really important. And personalize it to anything that you want it to be. It's not about what it is, it's about the human connection.
We built a muscle during the pandemic also. We were all going through something together. So we had this sort of shared experience, and we felt the comfort asking and answering the questions around, checking in on someone. And it was probably, you had this light bulb moment at some point in time during the pandemic, probably when someone checked in on you, and it's, the very American answer is, how are you doing today? Fine, thanks. How are you? It doesn't get to any level of depth. But people started sharing, and the reality is, at any given time, we are all going through something. We are all experiencing something. It just may not be that same thing. So how do we still give the space, still give the permission for people to discuss, to connect on things? We were connecting on favorite candies the other day, by the way, which gives a lot of insight into people. But I think we have to think about those moments of gathering and why we come together. So what are the modalities that we're using when we're coming together? So, you used to walk into an office, and I used to, actually, when I lived in Amsterdam, I rode my bike in every day, went upstairs, flipped open my laptop, looked through where I was supposed to be, what my meetings were, and then sort of moved forward from there. So you thought of where first. But now, that's not your first question. You think about what is the work that you need to be doing, with whom, how does that work need to be done? And then where does it need to be done? So that first question now becomes your fourth one. But then making sure that you have the tools for people to be able to sort of work in that mixed modality. So we talked a little bit about Slack, about Teams, et cetera, and this sort of ability to work asynchronously. Does it have to be a meeting? Do we actually have to be together at this time? I used to be on meetings at 3 a.m. to make sure that I was covering multiple different time zones, but actually could a lot of that work have been done through Quip, through Microsoft tools, through Google tools, et cetera, and making sure you push the limits on that. And there are organizations, I used to work at Salesforce, we had Async Week, where we actually tried this out, and the entire organization was working asynchronously for an entire week. And it really pushed the limits, and it really pushed you to think about, actually, no, that didn't have to be a meeting. We're able to do that in a different way, which actually created a greater opportunity for people who work in different styles, people who have children at home, et cetera. You're also at this point, too, where you're seeing into people's lives in a way that you didn't see before. And it's giving people permission to have a life while work is happening. Instead of, I stopped saying sorry, and I started saying thank you. So instead of, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, I'm 2 minutes late because I actually needed a technical break, as I refer to it, and I just walk in and it's, thank you for waiting for me. I have people with their children on their laps during calls, or someone had to swap onto a phone because they have to walk the kid 2 blocks away to get out a piano lesson. I don't have children, but I did during an interview for Stitch Fix have my then 4.5-month-old golden doodle poop behind me on my interview. So excuse me for a moment as I'm furiously cleaning up. But it actually brings a humanity to each of us, and it allows us, whether or not I wanted to have that authentic moment, it was there for me. But how do we actually utilize that to create better connection with our teams as well?
Yeah, and another thing that we have to realize is, at least that we see in our LinkedIn data, is there's an increase of 37% where people have changed jobs. So you have one aspect of, we all knew each other going into the pandemic, and so all those relationships were built, but then add the dynamic of people switching jobs within a pandemic, all of those relationships are not even established. So how do you actually onboard employees? All our onboarding strategies had to change completely, and people do not feel connected. They're taking longer. We were just talking about it offline before. They're taking longer time to onboard, and especially more junior folks. Like, imagine you just graduated from college and you're getting your first job. You are a bit lost. And yes, we've been in a pandemic, and you're like, yes, okay, we've been able to figure it out, but it's hard. It's really, really hard. So we had to rethink the way we onboard our employees. We also need to just figure out how we get to know each other. I mean, trust is like the number one thing before you even start working. You need to start building that relationship and start trusting each other. So I think right now with hybrid, which is great, we go to work to gather now. And yes, we're going to be behind on our emails and all those other things, Slack messages, team messages. But what you're going to do is you're going to have a moment to connect, because once you have that connective tissue, then you're going to be able to work on that hard problem that you were just talking about, because the trust is established. And we are even launching a thing at LinkedIn called, everything's with an N, but Connect In. So how do we get connected back to one another? And we're all trying to learn how to get back into this new world. But I just want to, it's challenging for the new people to start a new job in a pandemic. So I think there's also responsibility on us. Being at a company for LinkedIn for 12 years, I can talk to anybody throughout the company and know who to navigate to. If you see someone new that's onboarding into the company, what are you doing to help them get connected across the company, help them on that problem? So I think it's our responsibility to also reach out and lend a hand and help them on board, because it's really, really tough out there as well. I wanted to shift our conversation a bit, because we talk about being inclusive in the workforce and meetings and all those things, but let's talk about hiring. Hiring is really, really hard, and we want to build inclusive teams. And how do you do that? And I'm sure we all have different methodologies, which I would love to hear how you're all doing it. For LinkedIn, I would probably approach it in two different ways. One, how do we do it on the platform? And then two, how do we do it at the company? So from an engineering perspective, what we do is we talk about diverse slates. So as a recruiter, when you're going out and hiring talent, searching for engineers, for example, we want to make sure that those candidates that you bring to the table are diverse. So you're not just so yes, you're going to have to look into different groups of people and hire in different locations. And now with remote, which is absolutely amazing, the areas that you can go and recruit candidates just also opens up the pool. So if you can open up that talent pool and make sure that talent pool is diverse, then you start interviewing, and you will pick the best candidate. You don't want to be picked just because you are the diverse candidate. Please don't ever do that. That feels absolutely horrible. I'd never want to know that I'm hired because of my gender. It's not great. But what you can do is, when you force these metrics of, hey, give me a diverse set of candidates, hire the best candidate, that's how we're starting to move the numbers. And so that's what I'd like to hear across everyone else about how they're doing, how they're hiring personally. But the next thing is, how do we do it on the platform? One thing that I'm super excited about is our skills first strategy. So don't think about, okay, I was at this company, this is who I know, this pedigree school. Skills is your currency. That is how you should be hired, based on your skills. And so what we're doing in the platform is talk about all the skills that you have, and that is how we want to surface. That is the match of a recruiter and a job seeker together to get that next opportunity. And I want to share a story that we're also seeing. Because of the pandemic, people are changing the type of profession they have. And so the next question is, what transferable skills do I have that then can go to that new job? One story that I was real excited to see just recently on the feed, and we're seeing more and more of this, is there was a nurse. She was a nurse for 20 plus years. And with the pandemic, they went through a lot. She wanted to try a new job. So what transferable skills does she have? It was great. I saw her update. She's like, hey, I'm at LinkedIn now as a customer support manager. Imagine the skills that you have where you're dealing with patients all the time. That is transferable skills to now do this new job. So I think as we are all hiring talent, or maybe looking for a job, we should be looking at talent in a very different way. It's not like a check box, this needs to equal that. And so I think if we can just open our minds a little bit and focus on transferable skills, because people are changing jobs, it's not a perfect match, but focus on skills. So I'd love to hear what opportunities or how you're looking at hiring across.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that you definitely have to do with the diverse candidates is to make sure you also have a diverse hiring panel. Because, and again, you definitely want to start to represent what you're trying to build. You're not going to attract candidates into your company if you can't show that you respect and have diversity. And then, because again, the diversity comes down to not just like, checkbox, I have certain representation, but it really comes down to, but do I have different ways of thinking? Just like you said, like you brought in like, okay, here's somebody that like could transfer her nursing skills into, customer support. That idea might only come up because you had different people considering and looking at the position. If you had like the same sort of like group of people saying, okay, well, I just want more people like me into, our role, then they're not going to ever consider the nurse. But if you brought in folks from other places or even people that have changed their careers, they might look at everybody as a potential to change their role or career. So I do think it's like it's both sides, bringing in the pool, but then also having a diverse group of people that's sort of help you find those top candidates.
I think that competency-based thing is really critical. And it's also understanding where in your pipeline this drops off. So when you're looking at, okay, we have this job open, we opened a position actually about a week and a half ago, and we had over 600 people apply in the first day for a chief of staff role. Okay, what does that look like at that moment? What does it look like at the next? What does it look like at the next? And really digging into the data and understanding, how many white men apply to a white man being hired? How many people of color apply to and understanding where that discrepancy is and really challenging yourself at each of those stages in the process as well. I worked for an organization, and when I was working with one of the teams, I had a leader, and he was actually really wonderful in how he approached me. And he said to me, like, when I get down to 2 final candidates, and one is a man and one is a woman, I almost always pick the man, and I don't know why. Help me out. So we started interviewing together, but also what I started to find out is, in general, he knew that guy through someone else's network. So the female candidate wasn't a risk because of their gender, but it was because they weren't known through the network. And it's actually making sure, so how do we actually mitigate that? We started bringing females in to meet some of our leadership team and building relationships, establishing those relationships a year ahead, 2 years out, so that by the time that role was open, then we didn't have that blocker of like, oh wait, I don't know that person. That person is already known by our leadership team. Some of that risk is removed. So think through, where are those roadblocks? What are the things that you're hearing? Also, when you're debriefing on who's being hired lately, sit around a table. I encourage you to say, okay, we're going to look at all of our VP plus hires that have happened during the past 6 months. Who were the final candidates? And what did that slate look like? I'd also encourage us not to talk about a diverse candidate, because there's a little bit of othering there. It's a candidate, but look at that slate and what that slate looked like and who we ended up choosing. And in many cases, what you'll see is each person thinks, oh, it's just one more. It's just one more. And when you start to see the collective impact of that across an organization, there's a holy cow moment, like, ooh. And each person starts to actually own that a little bit differently and think through it, because they're not just thinking about what they're creating, but they're thinking about the sum of that creation of the organization that they're building.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, it kind of takes me full circle right back to onboarding and the importance of that. I mean, we have diverse slates at Microsoft as well and aspire to have diverse interview panels. But we also find, just like the generational thing we were talking about in terms of remote work and that extra help and support that those folks need fresh out of college, we also do find this with diverse employees as well. And so we're just piloting some things around that. We started a sponsorship program. Sponsorship is different than mentorship. Yep. And so, I have a sponsee that's a new diverse employee at Microsoft. They're not in my team, which I think is important. So we're cross-pollinating that and meeting regularly with them and trying to help them. It's really like building that network, right? It's so crucial to getting things done and being able to thrive and really meaningfully contribute to the organization and the broader team. And so those are just some of the things that we're trying.
Yeah, I think I love mentorship and sponsorship.
Yes.
But in addition to that, I think part of it is also because we can't, we've done this, we have a women's and Adobe Leadership Council, and one of the things that we sponsored was created a membership or a mentorship program where we would mentor like the up and coming female leaders in the company. And that's great because we can touch, say 50 or 100, different up and coming women leaders. But then I guess the more expansive part is like, what things can we do as actual leaders to change the culture or the workspace in general? So that, because at some point I can't mentor and touch everyone.
That's right.
But what I can do is to both be an example, but also when I come into the room, at least try to do what I can to change the tone of the meeting or find ways to make people feel more included in the conversation. I'm not a natural extrovert, so it's super hard. But I think I have deep empathy for people that are more introverted and maybe have to process things a little bit more. And you can almost start to see them on screen, since we're still a lot on screen, and then literally call on them and call, help them come into the room a little bit more. Sometimes that's all they need. It's like they can't figure out how to get into the conversation, but if you were to reach out and call on them, they'll be like, oh, you see me, and you feel like I have got something valuable to say and add. And almost every time that I've done that, that person has come back to me and said how much they appreciated that one moment because it just changed their trajectory. They started to realize that they did have a voice, they did have something to add. So I think the way I just want to build on is just like, I think all of us can do that in whatever position we have of setting that tone for the group. Because that is the culture. I know you're the head of culture at Stitchers. I wanted to hear more about like how you define that and what programs do you do to try to really encourage that culture that you're trying to build?
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, it's internal and it's external. So there are pieces that we're doing. We talked a little bit about some of the spots that we did. It's also making sure that we're listening in meaningful ways. It's making sure that we're opening the doors and we have discussions when we do have bumps and we don't live our values to their best. Having that open forum and having that discussion to bring people in. Also externally, thinking about how do we elevate the voices of others, and I talked a little bit earlier about equity. For us, we do have a program. It's called Elevate, and it's for designers who are people of color, and making sure that we are sponsoring these individuals, that we're mentoring, that we're helping to build the businesses. So there's people apply every year. We choose 5 of these individuals. Their product is on our site, but also we're working with them to help think through their merchandising, their business plan, what their brick and mortar is versus their e-commerce, et cetera. And actually, people who are runners-up, we mentor them and we work with them on their business plans and building throughout the course of the year. So it's making sure that what you're doing inside is also reflected in the work that you're doing outside, because it really starts to shift how you think about this and how you look at it internally when you're actually doing something externally as well. And as businesses, we really have an opportunity to be a great platform for change. And we have a responsibility, in all sincerity. The trust that exists, I think if we're looking at sort of what's happening in the world, the level of trust that we have with society is threatened at this moment. And when an individual can have a great level of trust in what their organization is building internally and externally, that's actually what drives that engagement. I know everyone is worried about the great reshuffle and I'm going to throw more stock at them, I'm going to throw more money at them. That makes a difference for a very short period of time. It's what you're creating and what change you're making in the world and how you reflect that in the work that you're doing.
You talked about different programs. One program, because we're all learning and sharing ideas here, is we have a program called Reach at LinkedIn. And what that is when you're trying to hire different people from different backgrounds, it wasn't the intentionality. You do have to have intentionality, but the intentionality of this program was not diversity. And what we did is we said we'd need to have more engineers from different backgrounds. And so we wanted to just put it out there and say, hey, tell us your story. You want to be an engineer? Tell us your story. Did you go to a boot camp? Did you do this? Did you have, on GitHub, you have basically the project that you built. It's such a trade, for example, that you can now actually be self-taught. And we said, tell us your story. We did blind interviews, and we started getting a massive respondents of applying for this job. And we took about 25 was our first cohort, maybe about 5 years ago. We got all these, we picked 25. It ended up being that they were all, it was a diverse set. It was like 50%. It was like, gender, race, everything. And you had that diversity because you just had that blind lens. And we brought them all on as apprentice engineers. And not as engineers right away, but we're like, we will help onboard you, and it'll be a 9-month program, and if you get to that next level, you will be a software engineer. And now looking back, this program's been running for a year. Now we're running multiple cohorts, but they're engineers on my team, and some of them are the best engineers where they're senior engineers, they're getting promoted. And so I think we have to just look at talent in such a different way than we have before. And so when you said a responsibility as companies, we have to create these programs. Like, these did not exist. You have to innovate. You have to create things to help rise and give different opportunities for different types of people. So I think the more that we are a little bit more responsible in innovating on these ideas, and we're always iterating, we're always learning, we're figuring it out. There's no perfect way to do this, and the world is changing, so we have to go along with it.
And thinking through the why we do this, thinking through inclusion as a business differentiator. Because at the end of the day, yes, it's the right thing to do, but also how does it impact our business? So I'd love to hear a little bit from some of the folks sitting along here with me. How has inclusion really differentiated your business and made your business better?
Yeah, I mean, I think about that a lot, really, because there's a part of us that we hear, and it's great that there's all these stats of how diverse groups or diverse, leadership, and all these stats on when you see the makeup being diverse, teams are more successful, companies are more successful. Yeah. But I like to do that thing where I kind of click into what you're asking, well, why or how? Is it literally that you just happen to put a diverse group of people together, and then that's the formula, it's over? And so as I click into it, what I find is that it then has to get down to the culture and the relationships that those people bring. So you have a diverse set of people, but then do they feel sort of psychologically safe with each other? Do they feel like they can express themselves? Because you could be, I've been on a jury, it's a diverse set of people, but I don't know these people, and it's not easy to create that space to feel like I'm going to throw out an idea. So it does come down to, are you creating a culture or a situation where every one of those people feel that they're in a safe space, that I can throw out a crazy idea, that you can challenge my idea very constructively, and then together we can actually come up with a better idea. That is ultimately the formula. You want a diverse set of people, but then you need the environment, the culture, the psychological safety, to allow those voices to be heard, respected, and feeling like you can brainstorm and do that. And some of the things that you can do to create that psychological safety, it comes back down to, because we're all people, is kind of getting to know each other, right? I mean, you're not going to feel super comfortable just sharing a crazy idea if you've never met these people before, or have no context for their background, or if they have no context for your background. So you do need that time to sort of get to know each other a little bit, and that's why I do that crazy hey, let's tell me a little bit about your childhood. Things like that to kind of create that environment where it's a little bit friendlier, so that you can do that thing where you're hey, I know I'm the the most junior person on the team, but I don't understand why we're doing this. That's what you want. You want those ideas. Because if it's only the ideas of the people with the highest titles, trust me, we didn't, some of us have high titles on here. We don't know everything. But if we can create an environment where we are part of teams where they're telling us their ideas and we're listening to those ideas, then we're going to be so much more powerful than we were. So I think it comes down to that combination of the diversity with the psychological safety and the collaboration amongst people to really then create an environment where you both feel like you can do your best work, right? I mean, when we're all kind of welcomed in to that community, you can actually then do your best work. And that's ultimately, at any company, that's what we all want. I mean, we're all here, we build software, and technology platforms. We're building things from scratch. That's probably the most magical thing that we can possibly do. And the only way we're going to build really cool, amazing products is by creating environments where people can do their best work, bring in their creativity and innovation, and make those things happen.
Yeah. I just want to add on to one thing that you just said, because it really just, people have to realize that they are a leader in any level of the organization. Yeah. It's like you have to use the voice that you have earned. Like, I love speaking to a junior engineer. You are master at your craft at that layer of the stack, and you are exactly right. We don't know everything. We don't. So we actually need to bring their voices forward. So I think, again, it's accountability on us, but because they may just think, oh, I'm junior, I shouldn't speak my mind, or it's like, no, actually, we need to hear from you. And so I think picking on them, literally saying their voice and say, hey, and I'll have them be like, oh, you want to meet? I'm like, yes, because I need to know exactly what's going on. You're doing this manual thing. We can automate it. We can build it. We can do it better, right? And so I think, again, use the voice that you've earned. Every level of the organization, there is a leader in that role, and I think that's real important for us to remind them that that is true.
Yeah,
so.
And just to build on that, I think it is about surrounding yourself with diverse perspectives to get the best ideas. We all know the business data and more productive teams and organizations, but I find there's sort of two kinds of leaders, right? There are leaders who understand that building a team of people you can learn from, right, with complementary strengths, not that looks the same, is the best way to get, fresh ideas, innovation, better business results. And so with that, I think we want to...
Wait, what's the other leader?
Well, I think there are leaders who culturally maybe don't understand that as well.
All right.
Right. But I think thank you for closing the loop. I think more and more, at Microsoft we talk a lot about our culture is one of embracing a growth mindset, and it really does start with this sort of learn it all mentality that extends to wanting to create, diverse teams.
So I want to thank my fellow panelists. I'm going to give them one more quick tidbit to leave you with. So what is one tip or advice that you'd like to leave the audience with? It could be something new, different, or something you just want to reshare from one of the answers earlier.
Yeah. I would say, last 2 years has had a lasting impact on everyone at work. This experience has touched all of us in deep ways, and it's sort of forever transformed how, when, why we work. And so now that with this move into hybrid, really do it with intention. It's going to take a new intentionality on every manager. Think about the role of the office, think about meetings, think about how you're bringing people together, rebuilding social capital, all those things. I think there's a new level of intentionality required from each of us at this moment in time.
Thanks, Colette. Linda?
I would say think about the roadblocks or the perceived roadblocks that exist, and your job as whether you're a leader, whether you're an individual contributor, how do we remove those roadblocks? Because it's always the perception of, oh, we can't do this because. Okay, well, let's remove that because, or how do we make that possible? So challenging what's possible, because again, we can't unsee what we've seen in these past 2 years when we've made an unbelievable amount of things possible.
I would just add, ask for feedback. You make decisions. You decide that it's going to be going this way after some learnings, but ask for feedback, and maybe you have to iterate and change again. So just don't be afraid to change some decisions and roll things back, but get that feedback so you know that you're doing the right thing for your organization and your employees.
So I wanted to add that leadership is hard. It's not easy, but you don't have to be a vice president or a manager to be a leader. You can all contribute to making your work culture, your work community much more inclusive. So thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you for being here.